Now I'm gonna count from 1 to 3, and we're gonna go and look at the topic of today's session, Lemuria. 1, 2, 3.
It's like I see the steady picture, but the time moves very fast. I need you to choose the period that you want to look at.
Let's look at the beginning formation of Lemuria as a region, the very beginning. Go there. Do you see Earth?
Yeah, I see just the plain. It's not a desert, but it's flat and just open space. But I know that underneath that kind of plateau that I'm looking at, there is something or some life underneath, and it's coming up. It's coming up. Um,
What's the location of this Play-Doh? What do you see around if you levitate, go up and see it from above?
there are some mountain ranges. Um, the water is far away. I mean, the big body of water, probably ocean or sea, is far away. Um, it feels like what we know now is somewhere Chinese-ish um, look, or I don't know. I mean, the way the nature looks, there are some mountains and there is just flat, then there is some green, but the area it's like one big, um, it's not an island, it's bigger. Um, it just, it's not an island, what I see now. It just the the earth, that's it. It just, there is what I see, there is no separation, no islands, just one mainland, which has the features of what now we know as China. Um, so then over there, something from beneath that Plato is trying to come up, crawl up. Um, they've been there for a long time, and now they know that it's safe to come up. Um, it's a, the population is huge,
What do they
but
look
most
like?
mostly those are reptilians. There are different species, but most of them are like they derive from reptilians.
Okay. Why did they go down in the first place, underneath the ground?
It feels like it was a battle or something with nuclear weaponry, and they just hid there. They needed to stay safe,
Mm-hmm.
and from the time when there was a devastation, it's been probably thousands, like
And
many thousands of years. So now they can come up.
who was the attacker in this battle? And the reason for the fighting?
Seems like it is the same race, we would say, like reptoids or something like this.
Mm.
But they didn't come to the like a peace treaty, who's gonna take what part and who's gonna be who, because there is always a division, and they wanted to, like, they had two main agendas, let's say, and they couldn't fit them together. So the others, they just started a war. But it's the same, I would even say it's the same family because they're all related. And they just didn't agree on the way they wanted to use the planet. That's how I see it.
Okay. And then, so what happens next after they come up on the surface?
First of all, they need to create the. Um, they not that dense as we would think. They lighter. They can change the vibration so you can see through, and if it's needed, they can become more solid. But right now on the surface, it's not really there. The climate is not for them. The environment is quite hostile for them because mm, so they need to create something artificial, like artificial grid or the energy field around the area that they're gonna uh, spread on, and they have a different technology, like different technologies. Um, they have some natural abilities, but it's usually not enough to maintain the energy for surviving and creating something. So mostly they build that. I see it looks like a pyramid, but it's so widespread on the area where they're gonna stay and start um, developing. But it looks like crystalline, but artificially crystalline. Because I see like devices, they kind of black or like dark color. They're not that big, but they are planted in the different points, and then there is one on top that you kind of under the dome, but it's not circle, it's the pyramid. Five, yeah, five points. So you have five devices, but they spread on the very, very long distance between. So then inside of that grid, they can create the conditions for them to sustain them physically, because the radiation from the sun is not really good for them. They, it's too high, too bright, but in terms of the frequency that it um, generates, the sun generates very high frequency, and they are not from here, not from this universe. So they, from where they are from, there is a different resonance, and over here it's too high for them. So they have to maintain the environment artificially in order to survive. So they just building that stuff, and then more and more of the population starts to come out, and there are different species, not only the reptilians, but they like kind of, mm, I wouldn't say they control, because everybody is able to communicate telepathically. Yes, you can close your channel so nobody knows what you think, or like, but in general the vibe is nice, I would say. They're not in the control mode.
Mm-hmm.
From there, they just they don't need really too much infrastructure, because the devices they have is enough. But the device is using natural earth resources, so they need to uh, dig them up, and they do it.
What kind of resources do they dig up?
Mostly they take out crystals, because they have the most power. They last very long in their power generation ability. So mostly those are crystals, and I see a lot of, I would say it's a pink quartz, clear quartz. Then there is some oil that they pump, but not as much. But there is some kind of mixture between the oil and the quartz that allows to sustain that pyramid for, I would say, several hundreds of years. So you don't really need that much of those crystals or the oil. It's kind of, they put that thing that it circulates, and the oil recharges from the crystals, so you don't need to replace that oil very often.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and let's go see how their life goes. Like, what do they do during the day other than digging the natural resources, and do they have any goals or working towards something?
Yes, they want to, a lot of those, let's say, people, most of them are scientists. So they work in different areas, on different fields of study. A lot of um, a lot of it to do with the genetics and how by manipulating it you can create different
Breeds.
life forms.
Mm-hmm.
No, yeah, you can call it breeds, but I feel like the breed, the word itself has a negative meaning. But in their view, they just create life. And there is a lot of work done on that part. And then the other guys that they, let's say they're not on the planet yet, but they're trying to get there. So they kind of always in confrontation. Those guys that bombed the Earth, like the same group but with a different agenda, they still trying to get in there. And it seems like eventually they got. They kind of decided to work together at the end. Um, but for now, those guys from this on the other side of the earth, like i- in space, let's say that they have their place there. They use different planets, so they stay on Mars, that's for sure. Then they have Venus over there, but they still trying to get to Earth. While I would say these are nice people. That the way I see them, they're nice. They trying to create life, and they have a variety of different species with them. There are humanoids that all of them, most of them, they see through. They are not that dense like we are right now.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say reptilian or reptile, some, it's not that they look like that, but they have the like genetics
Uh-huh.
from the species, but they are very highly evolved, and they trying to create something nice. Uh, but there is still the influence from the other group that is more, let's call them negative,
Mm-hmm.
and eventually they infiltrate, and it looks like they came to consensus about their agendas, because the good guys, they wanted to create life and seed it around. That's it. Just see how it's gonna go. Yes, they have some that I would say paternal relationship to what they create, but not the way that they want to control it. They want to see how it's going to go. And the other part is more controlling. They wanted to manipulate all the time, so they manipulate their own people. And that other side is also very evolved. They can be energetic and they can be physical. And when the ones on Earth started to progress, those from space started to infiltrate. And they they also they also do different stuff, but that one that's stands out the most, that they try to create life and seed it around, see how it's gonna go. And also the other project is very big, the one that allows them to sustain themselves in a more natural way. So they needed to change somehow themselves or earth energies to be able to live on the surface, because on the ground it was easier and they had kind of same artificial environment, but it wasn't. It was easier there because the radiation from the sun is not. It's kind of breaking down while going to the through the layers, but on the surface it's different. So they working on trying to see if they can change something in themselves to create um, kind of balance between them and the planet, but eventually it didn't really work for them because if they changed something, they lost one ability or another. Their frequency started to like they started to get sick, we can say, like in a simple term. So then they decided to change the planet, and there is a lot of stuff then started to go on. So they kind of then, I would say, just created the cataclysms that just destroyed a lot of their work, a lot of their species there, that eventually by the time that they started to create distortions and the different disasters, natural or we can say they are natural, but they're not really. Uh, a lot of them became more dense already. So they died. A lot of them died, but there were some that, uh, again, they came back on the ground. That's what they always do. Whenever there is something that is threatening, they go on the ground because they still have and had um, the place to live there.
Mm-hmm.
But they wanted to explore the outer so they can have this planet for themselves, and they would be um not would be but it would be that they are natural beings to that planet, though it's not really the case, but they wanted to do it to create it for them and then manipulate whatever they wanted because there is a lot of good stuff when you co-create with Earth. But they had to go and manipulate, and it didn't go well.
Mm-hmm. And what's the percentage of reptilian DNA in those?
The ones that I see, the group that is kind of good guys, and the main, I would say, like I see them as more as a scientist. That group that I'm looking at mostly, most of the time, because the rest they just doing different stuff. In them, the percentage is very high, but it's not that they are dense looking reptilians. They look like just the energy that can take any form, but mostly it has the blueprint of having two arms, two legs, a head, so you can see that. And then whenever they project themselves as more dense, then you can have the uh, scale scales and the different colors of the skin. Um, but they don't really do that much, especially in the beginning. They they don't need to be that dense because they can achieve more when they are in the higher vibration. So if you want numbers, then I would say it's like 85, 90% of them is pure reptilian, and then 15, 10 to 15 is different drops from other
Races?
yes, and I wanted to say like something mammalian or maybe like some what I know, but it doesn't go in that mixture. there is something different about them, and I don't have that knowledge. I don't know
Mm.
um, what other species DNA is in them.
Okay, so they came from space, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
it's
Yes,
not their
they
natural planet of
no,
origin. Okay. Eh,
they came from a different universe. It's not even their galaxy. It's different universe.
Which universe does it come to? What name or description? Or
I don't know the name. I don't see it. I just see the layers of the universes, and their universe is one like ours, and then like it's also like infinite amount of them. But if we zoom in, then you have ours, and theirs go one, two, three, four, like the fifth from ours in
mm,
the linear fashion that you can understand. Um, so they progressed from that and eventually came to this one. They just like exploring, moving. The part that is more, the more they go through the universes, the faster they digress, I would say.
mm-hmm. Interesting. How about the family structure?
That um, that group that is on Earth, they they strive for equality. So they have in their upbringing or DNA and culture, they have the different roles that they usually play, but on Earth they don't go by those rules. They go more in that way naturally, like if you know, you share. If you don't know, you ask, and everybody's there to assist you. But the influence from the other side that is more controlling, and uh, the other actually the other group um, is the reason why they are instead of making progress they regress. So they influence a lot, and but the group on Earth is trying to maintain that equality. So you just contribute to the whole with what you have, what you know, and you learn.
Okay, interesting. How about how do they teach the kids? So they're mammals, right?
No, no,
What
no. They're not.
they're not.
They are not. No. Um,
They're more like energetic, so right, and they're in energetic bodies. How do
yes.
they reproduce then?
Seems like they, I cannot call it reproducing, but they they more like projecting the body. If you go, it depends on what time you look at. When where I am right now, they don't use the reproduction and growth like we think, like we are doing. It's different. You just project, and you can project any form that is available from your DNA. So 85 will be reptilian, but still you can be any form in that blueprint. But plus you have 10 to 15% of different other species DNA, so you can integrate them, use them, and create some type of a new energy body. So it may look differently. And then when you want you or you need to be more physical, then you can see the form, and it's kind of humanoid, but there is no reproduction like we know it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look further, because they've been there for thousands of years until the infiltration took over completely, and then everything just went south. So it's been a long time, and at the end, when they understood that they cannot adjust themselves because they have like reptilian DNA has that very powerful thing. You don't change for a very, very long time. That's why you can live long. For
Mm-hmm.
example, humans now, like our form, our DNA allows us to adjust and change very fast. So we adjust to nature, to weather, uh, but the reptilian DNA doesn't do that. And that's why for them to create what they wanted was almost impossible. It would take like million years because they stay the same. So then they started to create different species using different DNA from different places and trying to create something that is um, that is gonna adjust faster, but still will have their DNA. And that's exactly when the infiltration started to rise very high because they started to trade with that uh, space group because they needed DNA. So then they created, I would say, I don't know if it's right, but I would say that they created humans as we know them. Not right now, but as we know them, like starting from very unevolved, just like, just to try to create the type of the body that will be able to adjust to whatever earth magnetic field and radiation that changes with the time will help them also to change and stay alive.
So, what was the end purpose of creating human race for them?
So they can live through them. So you
In
have
that
your way,
dimension,
like
in
yeah,
more
in
physical.
more physical because uh they couldn't stay in the physical long enough, even like they so highly evolved, so you can shift from being energy and then to uh
Solid, more solid, like.
yeah, to the physical form.
Mm.
But when you stay in the physical, then the laws of physics of this place, they affect you, and they couldn't stay long in their physical form, but they wanted to experience the physical. They wanted to create that whatever, like a new world for and create different species. What That's what they do. They like to create, and they wanted to play with the genetics of different whatever they had by that time. They have different genetics, because I see them not only as reptilians, because there are some others that are mm, humanoids, and there are those that I don't know the names of. I just see different, there is such big variety of different species, so they could play with them and create stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
to be able to work on the surface and then use the planet to create something different also, like it has a lot of potential to create different life, the earth itself. So they wanted to create with the earth, but they couldn't. They wanted to do it to be more physical, but they couldn't stay that long. So then they needed a vessel to be able to project themselves into.
Mm-hmm. I understand. And how about the reptilian brain that we have? Did they do that? Genetic manipulation?
Yes, because that's the part of their DNA that they, of course, they used it to create the new body, but they mm, they crossed their DNA with somewhere later. I don't know what is the timing, but later the um, other group of humanoids also came down. Uh, they also had some fighting between them, but the humanoids, they also were more energetic, but they were able to adapt very fast. So they had the human blueprint in them already. So they could be physical and non-physical, but the more they stayed, like the 100 years went by, the faster, like they could stay solid and more physical longer and longer and longer. So then they decided stop fighting with the reptilians and like those other races. They decided to create one that will have reptilian part and will have that human plus there was something from somebody else. I don't know what is the species, but the main part was uh let's say 45 human, 45 reptilian, but the human not in the sense that we understand. Human is from somewhere else. Yes, it's humanoid. Yes, it has um, arms, hands, legs, the body, the head, um, but it's much taller. It's the alignment in the body is so specific that nothing can penetrate it, like trying to manipulate. And the like the connection with where they came from is always there, no matter where they are because they also not from this universe, this type of humans. So eventually they just crisscross the 45% of reptilian, 45% of those humans, and 10% of whatever they already kind of had some luck. The reptilians had some luck with creating different types of bodies. So eventually they created something that evolved with the time into the humans we know today.
Hmm. Interesting. So, if we go and follow the timeline of Lemuria, how did they progress and what happened to them?
So because those the humans, the other from the other universe when they came, and they needed to create the vessels for them to project into to experience more physical and stay like all the time on that planet easily. The other group infiltrated and they had to work with them to have some support when they were fighting with the other humans, um, which eventually led to those two groups that, like the good and the bad guys, they just mixed. And the other group, they didn't want to just create with Earth or something. They wanted to go further. Like they have Mars. The whole thing is theirs. Now they want that the whole planet Earth is theirs, and the next, and the next, and the next. But the other group was like more benevolent, and they just wanted to explore. So eventually they mixed, infiltrated, and the bad guys took over, which led to staying in the physical. They couldn't project. In the beginning, they could project a lot of their energy into the body, but the body was mutating according um, according to the earth changes. So, for example, 100 years, 200, 300, then the body is a little bit different, and then a little bit different, and they could project less and less and less of their energy to experience that realm.
Mm.
So, um, which in turn created the kind of
Need.
regress,
Hmm.
yes, regress in consciousness, especially for those who were um, who wanted to explore and create something good, but they also started to change in their perception because they understood that they cannot survive like that. And still, the earth had so much to give them, but they couldn't take it because they were regressing instead of progressing. I don't know if it's clear, but there is so much in between of those things. Like I can see how the body is evolving, and at the same time, it seems like it is regressing.
Hmm.
So instead of being,
Consciousness,
I would
like
say so,
like
but
the.
it's on the physical also because you have the body which is more
Hmm.
physical than they want it to be
Hmm.
because they need it more dense, and they let it just to
Keep
adapt,
developing. Hmm.
yeah, by itself. But then it's not fast enough. They try to fix here and there,
Hmm.
which eventually brings that body into more dense. Then they go into the body, but they cannot project a lot of their consciousness into it. So while in that body they regress instead of being more. So it's like they wanted
Disconnected,
to
like,
do one thing, but they did the
mm,
opposite.
okay. The experiment got out of control. And like they're not connected to their subconscious anymore, right? As
The
much as
main,
they.
yes, the main problem, or I would say their mistake, was that they first wanted to become more physical to be able to use. By the end, in the beginning they wanted to co-create, but at the end they wanted just to use earth for their purposes.
Mm-hmm.
And what they needed to do is to create the body connecting their DNA with the earth DNA, because the earth has so many places, we can call them like vortices or chakras, where the earth creates DNA. And
Mm-hmm.
if you put the DNA, you you have it, you have the DNA, like they crossed, yes, the reptilian and the other humans from the other universe. So what do? You can just put it into the womb chakra,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and you need to know when. There is some precision to that. It depends on the, like, the alignment in the cosmos and all the like different processes. So then what you integrate that DNA that you have, and then it is being recreated. First,
Mm-hmm.
it is like it multiplies, plus it has the spark, the true essence to it. So then you are able to project more consciousness into it. But they didn't do that.
Mm-hmm. And why didn't they do that?
Seems like they were not that evolved, because they knew, I mean, they,
Separation happened, right, by then, and they weren't connected as much
yes, it's like
spiritually into.
they lacked the knowledge about the place they came to.
Mm-hmm.
They lived there for so long on the ground, trying to see it from the space and work and manipulate the, and be like the energy, that is the energy, but they didn't have the real knowledge about this planet. They knew that it has so much, but they didn't know what exactly it had. And they didn't search, or I don't know why they couldn't communicate or whatever. I don't know. Seems like they couldn't communicate with Earth. That's why it's not for them.
Because they haven't come from Earth, and they have
No.
a different, originally different vibration,
Yes, which means that it's not for you.
not compatible.
Go. Yes. If it's
Mm-hmm.
not for you, you just go and find what is for you. But they wanted to try and, like, we can do that. But
Adjust.
yeah, and the other group, they were more evil. They had like more, different tactics. So I think, or not, I think it's just more like
You
the
know.
feeling
Mm-hmm.
is, yeah, that the earth gave them just a little bit to progress, but because they didn't show or didn't use their free will to really know the planet, it just didn't open up for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, didn't do it the right way.
Yes, and it does, and the Earth decided not to take part in that. It was just waiting until they just gonna go off, but they still here,
Mm-hmm.
and I guess her patience is running out.
Mm-hmm. I understand. Interesting. And so, And where's Lemuria now? Does it even exist?
Of course it does. I'm looking at it.
At what level? What timeline? Or is it more astral now than physical? How can you describe it?
I don't know how to answer that question because depending what are you looking for, when and from what perspective, you
What
can
Earth?
see it being just the energy, just the wave form, the platform that is there is developing right now. The only thing that there were several several times they started again. They understood that destruction was coming, and they created the other timeline, like, went back, started
Mm-hmm.
again, then went
Like a
back,
loop.
started again. Yes, and it's been like several times. So right now what I see that they jumped several times, but the timeline that I described, I perceive it, I believe that it's there because it has some part to play. So it's in our timeline. And if you jump there in the period when they were more energetic on the physical, but more highly vibrational resonance, like even the earth itself, like you stand on the ground, but it's not like right now we stand on the ground and we don't really feel anything. Over there you stand, first of all, the earth was bigger, and when you stand, even in your energy form, you get the information from the environment, from earth. It depends where you're gonna put your attention to. So you communicate with all around you. But they eventually lost that ability because the earth didn't want to deal with them because they lacked that connection. And right now we just, some people have, but most of the people don't. And I would say that over there, then it was a solid place, but on a very high vibrational platform. Eventually, it regressed to more dense and more dense and more dense.
Did
So
it regress in correlation with the Earth's regression, or like?
yeah, all together, because then because of those jumpings, then the guys that humans from the other universe,
Mm-hmm.
they created their civilization. There were some other stuff that they were doing. A little bit later, they came later than the reptilians and called, like, what we call Lemuria. The I think what we call Atlantis, it was a little bit later, but then they ran simultaneously, and both they were failing for whatever they wanted to use the earth for. Instead of working with it, they tried to manipulate. And right now, it has the part, let's say, in the history of this timeline. And if you go to that moment, they're still there. But if you ask right now,
I
it's,
understand. Yeah, it depends on the
yeah,
dimension,
how you want to
timeline,
see it.
everything,
Yes. If you
the
look,
multiple Earths.
I would say that as a layer, it's still there. It exists in all the forms before, during, and after the presence of anyone on
Mm-hmm.
that. in that location. So it is still there. If you want to um, go back to that place, it will be there.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, it it's more like a karmic resolution that ties that place to um, the whole picture that we have now. But it's not like I heard a lot, though I'm not really interested in that topic. I heard that people are waiting for Lemuria to come back, to reappear, which I don't really see that happening on the like
On
the
this
screen that I'm
particular
seeing.
timeline. Mm-hmm.
Yes, because it's what it brought eventually was the distraction. Then this is not the way to go again. If they repeat it 4 times, they didn't understand. So then it feels like there was some kind of natural law that just stopped them from leapfrogging in time. So they can repeat it again and again and again because every
Mm-hmm.
time they made one and the same mistake. They, from the beginning, didn't connect to Earth to create whatever they wanted to create. They wanted to do it by themselves, then seed everything around, and then go from there to the next planet. But so it is still here, and what I said, it's like looks like China now, in the Himalayas, and where there like it's more flat. Then there is some that is sank, and but the thing is that right now, the way our world we see on the map, it wasn't like that before. So it may look like that, but it doesn't mean that it was that there. Specifically, the Lemuria was there. No, it looked like that. But when I was looking from above, there was one huge mainland, not like we have now. We don't have huge mainland. We have a very tiny, because before the earth was so big that right now we have just
How many times bigger would you say?
like seven that comes to
Wow.
mind.
Did it look like? Did it have a lot of lakes, like water,
Yeah, a lot of water
more than now?
because it is a water planet. If we start from the very beginning, it is a water
Mm-hmm.
planet. But then, yes, different changes, and like you're human, you want to change sometimes the color of your hair, you want to do different
Mm-hmm.
style, you dress differently. So the earth also is going through those changes.
Mm-hmm. I understand.
And yes, and it changes its form. There were some cataclysms. There were, like, the natural
Yeah, there's a
processes,
lot of stuff.
but then there were unnatural processes.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was very big, a lot of water, a lot of space, I would say. It was like multi-dimensional.
Mm-hmm.
And when the reptilians came, they still had that part where they could know, talk, and communicate with the environment, with the energies, but they didn't know that much, and that let them down.
Mm-hmm.
I think they needed to do some homework before coming, but they didn't do that.
Good. Thanks. Let's see. Well, If there's nothing else to add for today, I think it might be enough. Maybe we'll continue with some other questions later in the other session.
Hmm. Yeah, because I
Okay.
just I just feel that very nice vibe from that group,
Mm-hmm.
and they they were just the message from that picture is that no matter how evolved you are, it doesn't mean that you know everything because they were genuinely for creation, but they let the other group to bring some bad stuff in them and they started to regress. And the same about humans. It's like if you let something not nice to come and, like just tell you again and again and again, and then you start to believe it and you start to regress. Though you think that you are evolved enough, I would say um, there is no scales that you can see like that. You here or you there, or you higher or you lower, because it's always progressing, always evolving. You just need to be careful when you work with the energy or with yourself or with somebody else, not to try to mm, not to try to dominate them with your idea, because your idea right now is evolving too, and you cannot know how it's going to evolve in like 5 minutes or 10 years. So don't push on anybody. They're going to find whatever they want to find. The only thing you need to always keep in mind that everything is expanding all the time, and just keep your connection so you don't get lost, because those guys, they got lost. And
Mm.
honestly, I feel like they're very nice beings, because they were not just the split souls, they were whole higher self which wanted to play and wanted to put more of it consciousness into the physical, but eventually they couldn't do that. So because they just skipped one thing, is the connection.
I understand.
It's
It's
very
a very,
sad actually for them.
very good conclusion for people to think about. It's perfect. Thanks.
Welcome.
Um, okay, you
Okay.
just check check out your energy sphere, all the bodies, and you know what to do. I'm just gonna wait for you. I'm